Well, here I am. It's a bit shell-shocked, not shell-shocked really, just that we've got a protest going on over the road, and actually it is not badly attended as far as protests go. In a small town, it's outside the county courthouse, the Crown Court, and it is bang smack on the high street. So they've got two groups of audience. And they are protesting about deportations. It says stop deportation. Which group it is, I have no idea, because I can't actually leave you and run outside to ask. But they're chanting and they're shouting and they're getting little speeches. They're doing all the right things. So God bless them. Except we're not terribly pro demonstrations in this channel, but still, is if they've taken the time and trouble to come out and they feel strongly enough and they do it in an orderly fashion, why not? Why not indeed? Now, down to very good basic things, because it's Tuesday and it's 20 to 10. There aren't many people that can have the little glass of beer at 20 to 10. And I'm one of them, because Kevin has been getting the beer ready for the week at the White Hart. And yes, I'm the official taster. Yes, that's okay. And yes, now I think what this is this Cronenberg that we just tested, and there's an Amstel, Cronenberg and Amstel. That's what's on tap. Pretty good. I'm not going to miss the opportunity. I can't finish the glass, but by golly, I'm going to take a big sip. Right. So let's now go to the business in hand, and let's take a look back at what the Black Death did in Lewis way back in medieval times. In fact, it wiped out a whole community, turned it into a ghost town, which is what it is today. So here we are, the bloody past of a tiny town. Enjoy.
He sat on the bank, while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world. That was the excitement that Mole experienced in the story Wind in the Willows. And indeed, rivers large and small everywhere all have many stories to tell. The River Ouse that flows through Lewis is no different. In fact, for much of the town's history, it has played an important part. Today, the river carries nothing but pleasure craft. But for a long time, it was a busy, bustling port. About a mile upstream from here is the village of Hamsey. It sits on a triangle of land which splits the river as it curves down towards the town. Hamsey is barely a village today. A few houses with the 13th century church standing in splendid isolation. But Hamsey was a Saxon port in the pre-Norman era. Historians estimate that over 1,000 people lived here, populating a port that saw ships sail up the Ouse to trade goods. There is no doubt that the Normans had a bit to do with its demise. The area was handed over to a Norman lord. But the community was attacked by an enemy it couldn't stop. An army of rats, which disembarked from one of the visiting ships, went ashore and infected the village with bubonic plague, the Black Death. The disease devastated Hamsey, and while there is no historic evidence, legend has it that the residents barricaded themselves in to prevent unaffected people coming in and diseased people getting out. Eventually, they starved to death. Named after the black rats which carried the plague, the Black Death killed over half the population in Britain between 1348 and 1349. The survivors founded another village off Ham, the modern thriving village of Oakham. The plague attacked Lewis several times over the following centuries, each time causing significant loss of life. So death continued to stalk Lewis, bringing tragedy to the high street in rather greater measure than other UK high streets. Hamsey gone, but Lewis as a port flourished. Ships and barges plied their trade up and down the Ouse, creating an exciting and bustling waterway. Many of these buildings, which stand on an extension of the high street in an area called Cliff, are built with old ship's timbers. Where Argos now stands was a sailor's pub called the Bear, built as a brewery in 1787, and it succumbed to the carelessness of revelry and burned down in 1918. This quiet domestic street, which runs for a short distance parallel to the Ouse, was the sailors' playground, and history relates that there were more than a dozen brothels successfully operating. Today, this street is known as Little Chelsea. Even the name makes it seem a nice place to live. The rather small abodes have found favour with many modern Louisians and are now favoured homes. And why not? They look good in a twee kind of way. And if you're not living in a former brothel, there are other historical backgrounds to raise the interest. All this talk of pubs and trading around town, it saps my energy. So I sometimes come to this little oasis. The Notts Garden in Southover Park, a lovely little hideaway. Back to the High Street, or at least its extension into the cliff area of Lewes. So I've been wandering around here because Lewes is full of antique stores and models. As I mentioned, go inside some of these shops and you'll find that they're supported by old ship's timbers. Another reminder of the days when Lewes was a port. All this talk of water has made me thirsty. I made several mentions of the time Lewes had 63 pubs. As you would expect, among the 16 that are left, there are some with strong ties to the community. Over the road from the shops, held up by ship's timbers, is the Gardener's Arms. There seems to be a tradition in Lewes, although no one admits to it, of omitting the epithet pub or tavern. This pub is called by locals simply the Gardeners. And the Gardeners it was. The origins of this pub go back to when it was an ordinary house, owned by a gardener. Often, after work, he would invite other gardeners into his front room for a drink. Eventually, it made sense to formalise the ritual, so it turned into a pub. The Gardener's is a true pub. Unusual now, it only serves pork pies and sausage rolls. Yet each year it's in the top tier of finalists for Pub of the Year. Magnificent. Back to the Street of 1,000 Brothels. Well, perhaps not 1,000, but a few anyway. There's a pub called the Snowdrop. Nice pub, they tell me. Interesting for its name and where it stands. This is the site of England's deadliest avalanche. Just after Christmas in 1836, heavy snow built up on the edge of the downs. There were 7 cottages here where the pub now stands. Despite warnings, the people living there went about their business, totally unconcerned about the snow. Then whoosh, down it came, demolishing 7 cottages and taking the lives of 8 people. Time, gentlemen, please. Not heard now, but the admonishment of past landlords that it was time to quit drinking should have been heeded by the cottagers. A disaster both for the country and the town. A brief mention of one last hostelry, the John Harvey Tavern. Named after the founder of a local brewery, the one of 16 to survive to the modern day, Harvey's has been around since at least 1790. And an important inhabitant. Along with Mole and Ratty on the banks of the River Ouse. More on that later. For the moment, back to the bar. How I wish I'd lived in Lewes when it had 63 pubs. Bliss. You might think, from the pubs I've been into, that Lewes is a drinking town. The town constable in the late 1800s didn't think so. The town constable in 1890 didn't want it to be. Here are some notes from the High Constable of Lewes, a gentleman called John Holman, dated 1880. Sunday, the 10th of October, visited all the public houses during morning service. All in good order, except Lewes Arms, several there tippling in service time. Sunday, the 17th of October, visited public houses, all in very good order, except the Lewes Arms. Again, a second time, several persons in both parlour and taproom tippling at 11:30, time of divine service. Gave the landlord a caution. Sunday, the 14th of November, visited public houses as usual, witnessed very great indecency in the person of George W. Several persons were tippling during divine service, and on our approach to do our duty, they were permitted to hide themselves upstairs in the pub. This was the 3rd or 4th offence of the same kind. Wow, a bit different today. But beer is very close to the hearts of this Sussex town, because it's one of the main employers and industries. Earlier, I mentioned the John Harvey Tavern. John Harvey started his brewery on the banks of the River Ouse in 1790. He was one of the 16 that flourished here at one time. Now, with just the odd microbrewery popping up here and there, it's the only one. The brewery is close to the hearts of the community. The pubs it owns have in the main remained traditional, while its method of delivery has most definitely remained in the past. Miles Jenner is the chief brewer, and his range of beers reflects the activities of the local community. The dray that trots around town is a symbol of the tradition of the brewery, but also of the town. The beer maker turns out beers named after local events: Firecracker, Tom Paine, Bonfire Boy, and Lewis Castle. The name Harvey, synonymous with Lewis. You've been around, or the brewery has been around for quite a long time. Can you develop a little bit of the history for us?
Yes, the family came down, the Harvey family, from London. They were wine and spirit merchants at the end of the 18th century, and they started brewing in Lewis and on this site in the early 19th century.
I can stand next door to a man in a pub in Lewis, and he will swear that Harvey's taste quite different to anything else, and he won't drink anything else. I mean, what's the secret of the product?
Any brewer's beer is really a derivative of his water and yeast strain. We never talk of water, we talk only of liquor, but a local water supply and the brewer's yeast strain, it gives his beer an individual character. You could take our recipes, exactly the same raw materials, go and brew at another brewery with their water and all their yeast and have a totally different brew at the end of it.
Talking of water, and you mentioned that the barges came up the Ouse. How important was that to the brewery in the past?
Well, I think it was very important. It was, a fundamental form of communication, and if you were bringing a fair few tons of barley upstream, then it was a very sensible way of delivering. But just as industry sent stuff out to the river, so the river sent stuff back to them, and it wasn't unusual to brew with river water around your feet. And the last big flood we had in 2000, we were 6 foot deep in river water. We got our product together very well, we had a good reputation, the brewery was re-equipped, and we were producing a beer which became very much identified with the local community and was dear to their hearts. The fact the building is actually known as Lewis Cathedral tells you something about the way that Harvey's is viewed in Lewis.
The brewery flourished, but Lewis as a port rapidly declined. The familiar barges that had plied the River Ouse in the early 19th century carried loads of clay to the town. But the clay was used to build the beds for railway lines, and the death knell for river traffic sounded. The ships had consigned themselves to history. The first train to run from Lewis was in 1846. Since then, the railway has become an important junction in the national network. Trains from Lewis station run to Brighton in the west, Hastings in the east, Newhaven Port in the south, and London in the north. There have been successes and failures. Other lines were axed over time, with one, the Bluebell Railway, preserved as a steam preservation project. Back to our tale of the High Street. Cliff High Street is an extension of the High Street ending at the base of the Downs. At the end of it is an ancient church, St. Thomas of Becket. The Black Death wasn't the only medieval disease to strike Lewis. Leprosy was rife. This infectious and unsightly blight is first recorded in Lewis in soldiers who took part in the Battle of Lewis. It seems that the monks of the priory tended leprous people in 2 hospitals. Of the larger hospital, St. Nicholas, little remains, but the smaller hospital of St. James also treated lepers. Bones of the hundreds who died in the Battle of Lewis showed that leprosy was widespread. Don't wear this hat to look pretty, you know. There's a Sherlock gene in me somewhere that gets me into more trouble than enough. So I'm going to stick my head above the parapet and suggest that there's evidence of leprosy here long before the Normans paddled ashore at Hastings. The Church of St Thomas of Beckenham Cliff, that's the very far end of the High Street up against the Downs, has a leper's slit. This was a channel built into the church wall so that lepers could take Holy Communion without infecting the congregation. St Thomas's is a very ancient church, with bits of it predating the Normans by quite a few years. The interesting thing about this slit is that it starts and ends inside the church itself. Additions were made to the church over the years, so it appears that the leper's slit was built into the original church, but encompassed within it as it was enlarged. Certainly leprosy entered Europe about the 4th century, but was only virulent in the 11th. But it seems that the disease was already in Lewes well before that. Anyway, the Cluniac Priory tended to lepers until a certain king's greed and love life shut the priory down. So leprosy can be added to the Black Death as a scourge of Lewes. But let's shuck off the historic events of bloody Lewes and celebrate the river, the way that our friends in Wind in the Willows did, the lovable mole and his friend Gung-Ho Ratty. Each summer, a raft race is held on the Ouse by the local round table. Teams from organisations, schools, businesses and even groups of individuals construct weird and wonderful rafts and race each other from Lewes down to the sea at Newhaven. Not a very fair race. The crews bombard each other with flour and water bombs, water pistols and any other old rubbish. Spectators add to the mayhem by pelting other missiles at the crews.
The first few hundred meters are quite torrid, because from the bridges here, people hurl flour bombs and eggs and all sorts of things at you, really. But when you get past Lewes, it's quite peaceful and serene down the river, and you've got the tide to help you along as well. Last year the theme was the Rio Olympics, so again it was quite open to interpretation. You could just take Brazilian culture or, of course, the Olympics. I actually took part last year. I duly sank in Newhaven Harbour, unfortunately. But obviously we put the proper safety provisions in place, and we were fished out before we were swept out into the English Channel. There's been suggestions this year that there will be pirate rafts and people drinking rum and trying to board other people's boats, but we'll see how that happens. We're limited for safety reasons to 25 rafts. In the next number of weeks, we're going to have talks with all the safety bodies, and perhaps we may be allowed more, but obviously safety is our main priority. This year I've been absolutely inundated with applications. I think I've sent out over 100 application forms.
Wow! Now how do you select which of the 25 are going to be lucky?
It's down to, in a lot of cases, the event is sponsored. So in many cases, sponsors may get priority, but overall it's just a lottery, really, and or the best rafts will be chosen.
Now, in fundraising, do people just donate, or what do? Do you have people shaking cans?
There's a certain amount of bucket collections, and also there's an entry fee for the raft race itself. A good portion of that money goes to the actual operational costs of providing the safety provisions and so on. But obviously, whatever's left over will go to the local charity.
Right.
This year, we're also in partnership with Newhaven Town Council, because they really wanted to get more involved, because obviously it finishes there. So this year we will be supporting a charity in Lewes and a charity in Newhaven.
A lot of people line the banks. Do you take an estimate of how many people are here on a good Sunday?
We would estimate maybe 5,000 to 7,000, but there's no way of telling, really. But it seems to be a very popular event, and the people of the town have taken it to their hearts.
Yes, indeed they have. I mean, it's a wonderful occasion. After all the bloodshed and death in this little town, that regatta makes me feel a lot better. Time for a little nap, I think.
Oh, there you are. Another peek into the past of a tiny town with the bloody high street. So there's plenty of blood spilled on this high street, believe me. But at the moment, it's all peaceful. There's a fair old crowd out there is demonstrating against deportations. I am not quite sure who the group is. There is a sort of a logo, looks like a swallow, either a swallow or an unmanned satellite, a bombing device. But anyway, right now it is 5 past 10. Is it 6 past 10? We could say toodle pip for the moment, but I don't think we will. We'll take. Well, first of all, this has been very popular, so let's just give it a quick run. Very short. Well, there you go. There's a look at Lewis from the clouds above the roads and so on. Not a very long video that, but nonetheless, it gives us a chance to. Yeah. Well, let's tell you who we are. Mirador Television. Broadcasting out of the White Hart Hotel in the center of Lewis, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, from 8:30 in the morning until 11 o'clock. Now, that's at the moment. It may be that we're going to expand those hours a little because some exciting news is we had a little meeting on yesterday actually. We decided to ignore the holiday and have a chat, and we are going to do our best to start and provide you with a little branch, if you like, in Chichester, so that each day we would not abandon, but we would switch from Lewis to Chichester and talk about some things which were pertinent to that lovely little town, And as you know, we are local, not parochial, so we don't really look for things that are necessarily exclusively for local people. We use local events, local people, local situations, both to alert you to what's going on, but also to alert the world. And we do have a number of people who participate, who watch, who tap, view, or whatever around the world. One particularly in Patagonia, but the idea is that anything that emanates from here will be for national and international, but there will be a certain root interests in the various programs. And one of the new group interests making his debut tomorrow, Mark Lattray, who is going to be the main host for Chichester, and he's got a colleague. Once he's got his feet under the table, the colleague is a journalist and will actually the journalist will actually run a little Mirador in Portsmouth. So we're expanding, or at least we're attempting to, and I hope that you'll wish us well. But I'm sure that you'll find it interesting to find out what's going on in those two communities. And Jane Watkins is going to start feeding stuff regularly from Hastings. So all in all, our little network is beginning to take off and to thrive. And as was our promise a couple of years ago, we really are trying hard to look after the communities from, well, I suppose, West Sussex, across West Sussex, and through East Sussex. Their only criteria is that they must be tiny towns. We're not interested in big cities. You get all that sort of stuff from people who specialize in covering big cities. We actually specialize in something that is more smaller, more down to earth, but nonetheless pertinent to those people who would, can, and will vote for our little television operation, which is miradortelevision.com. Yes, I think that's supposed to be it. Hey, by gum, lad. Okay. Shall we? We'll take a. We won't carry on with this session. We'll take a break. We'll come back in about 15 minutes just to say for a wind down and to take it through to the rest of the day. So, for the moment, toodle pip.